The winter garden had always felt haunted, but not by spirits. No, the labyrinthine hedges and frost-clad statues were haunted by absence. The absence of warmth, the absence of life, and most deeply, the absence of choice. Princess Evelyne wandered its pathways that night, not in search of peace, but in defiance of it. Wrapped in a cloak of midnight blue, she let the chill bite at her skin, hoping it might make her feel alive. The moon was a mere crescent, sharp and cold as a blade. Its pale light spilled over the snow-laden paths, turning the world into a monochrome dream. Evelyne's breath hung in the air like fleeting ghosts. Behind her, the grand castle loomed, its turrets piercing the heavens like the bars of a golden prison. She reached the heart of the garden, a secluded clearing where the ancient yew tree stood sentinel around a frozen fountain. The air was still, unnervingly so, as if the world held its breath. That was when she heard it. A sound like the faintest chime of bells, growing louder, closer. From the shadows emerged a figure, no taller than Evelyne's shoulder. Wings of fractured light glimmered behind her, catching the moonlight like shards of crystal. She was not beautiful in the way of fairy tales, but in a way that made the heart stammer. A face too sharp, too perfect, and eyes that seemed to see too much. "You've been calling," the creature said, her voice lilting yet heavy, like a melody played on an unfamiliar instrument. Evelyne's heart clenched. "I've called for no one." The fairy smiled, though the expression felt like a secret kept just out of reach. "Not with words, but your sorrow is loud enough to break through worlds." She tilted her head, studying Evelyne with an intensity that made the princess feel as though she stood bare in the snow. "You yearn, do you not? For a life unbound by duty, unchained by expectation." The words struck too close. Evelyne swallowed the lump forming in her throat. "If you already know, why ask?" "Because I wish to help." The fairy extended a hand, delicate and pale, yet it carried the weight of something unspoken. "I am Liora, a creature of bargains, not blessings. Your dreams can be made real, but they will demand a price." Evelyne laughed, though there was no humor in it. "A fairy offering wishes? How quaint. Do you expect me to give you my soul in return?" Liora's smile sharpened. "Souls are the currency of fools. No, my prize is your heart." The words hung in the frigid air, and Evelyne felt a pang of unease, though she masked it with defiance. "My heart. On the final stroke of midnight, when the new year begins, you will give it to the witch of the forest. Until then, your heart will remain yours, and with it, I will craft the life you desire. Freedom, joy, wonder, it can all be yours." The fairy's eyes glittered with a strange intensity, and Evelyne shivered, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something that whispered warnings her pride refused to heed. "And if I refuse?" Evelyne asked. Liora's wings trembled, scattering motes of light into the darkness. Then you will return to your cage, where duty smothers your spirit and dreams decay into dust. You will survive, princess, but you will not live. The words stung, and Evelyne's resolve wavered. She thought of the crown waiting for her, the endless rituals, the hollow smiles of courtiers who saw her as nothing more than an emblem of power. Could she endure another year of that monotony? Another lifetime? What happens if I agree? Evelyne's voice was soft now, almost tentative. Liora stepped closer, her form wreathed in a faint, otherworldly glow. Your wishes will unfold as if the world bends to your whims. But remember, every miracle demands balance. At midnight, the witch will come to claim her due. Evelyne hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. The garden seemed to close in around her, the statues watching, the moon waiting. Very well, she said at last, her voice barely audible. I accept. Liora's smile widened, though it held no triumph. She reached out, brushing her fingers against Evelyne's chest. A faint warmth spread through the princess, and she gasped as she felt a part of herself shift. Something intangible yet vital slipping into the fairy's grasp. The pact is made, Liora said, her voice resonant with finality. Dream well, princess, for the clock is always ticking. Before Evelyne could respond, Liora vanished, her form dissolving into shards of light that danced on the night air. Alone again in the garden, Evelyne stared at the empty space where the fairy had stood, her heartbeat louder than ever in her ears. Somewhere in the distance, the castle's clock struck 1, each chime echoing like a warning. When Evelyne awoke the next morning, the world felt different. The sun spilled golden light through her window, painting the frost on the glass in dazzling hues. For the first time in years, the sight brought a smile to her lips. She dressed quickly, her fingers trembling with an anticipation she could not explain. The change revealed itself in small, wondrous ways. As she stepped into the grand dining hall, she found a feast awaiting her. A lavish spread of foods she had only dreamed of tasting, their aromas intoxicating. The servants bowed, but not with the mechanical subservience she was accustomed to. Their smiles were warm, their movements filled with purpose, as if they too were swept up in some unseen magic. Evelyne felt lighter, her steps buoyed by a strange sense of freedom. When she ventured into the castle gardens later that morning, the winter blooms, usually dormant under snow, had burst into life. Roses the colour of twilight, and lilies glistening like starlight swayed in a gentle, inexplicable breeze. "You're welcome," came a voice from nowhere, soft and melodious. Evelyne turned sharply to see Liora perched on a branch, her crystalline wings catching the sun's rays. "You did this?" Evelyne asked, though she already knew the answer. The fairy grinned, leaping down to land lightly before her. "Did you doubt me, princess? Your dreams are my canvas, and I paint with the colors of your heart." The princess hesitated, the memory of their pact gnawing at her. "It feels too easy." Liora's gaze turned sharp, like a knife glinting in the light. "Miracles should never feel hard. But remember, ease is not the same as permanence." She tilted her head, studying Evelyne with unsettling intensity. "Are you afraid of enjoying this? Knowing the cost?" Evelyne opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. Was she afraid? Or was it guilt that lingered in her chest, like a shadow behind the light? That night, the magic continued to unfold. Evelyne had long dreamed of escaping the suffocating formality of royal life, and now she found herself moving through the castle as though she were invisible to the chains of duty. No meetings, no expectations, no whispered discontent. Instead, there were banquets that seemed to appear out of thin air, music that played as if conjured by the wind, and dances where her feet barely touched the ground. She was no longer a princess shackled to tradition. She was a creature of freedom, unbound and untamed. But as days turned to nights, and nights turned to mornings, Evelyne began to notice the cracks beneath the glamour. Her dreams, though dazzling, felt somehow incomplete. The music, while beautiful, held a strange, dissonant edge. The laughter that echoed through the halls was hers, but it felt hollow, as if it belonged to someone else. Each evening Liora would appear, always with that enigmatic smile. "You're quiet tonight," the fairy remarked one evening as they strolled through the enchanted gardens. Evelyne brushed her fingers over a rose, its petals softer than any silk she'd known. "It's all so perfect," she said, though her voice wavered. Yet. Evelyne turned to her, her brow furrowed. "It feels like it's slipping through my fingers even as I hold it." Liora's expression darkened for the briefest moment, though her smile remained. "That's the nature of wishes, my dear. They are fleeting by design." She stepped closer, her wings shimmering in the moonlight. "But why dwell on such thoughts? You have days yet to enjoy all that you've dreamed of. Let the cost be a worry for another time." The princess wanted to believe her, wanted to lose herself in the wonders Liora conjured. But there was something in the fairy's words that twisted like a knife in her chest. A reminder of the pact she had made and the price that loomed ever closer. The next morning, Evelyne awoke to a strange silence. The music had ceased, and the vibrant gardens were veiled in mist. Wandering through the castle, she found herself alone. The servants had vanished, the halls echoing with her solitary footsteps. Liora appeared once more, this time seated atop the throne in the grand hall, her wings folded neatly behind her. "Is this another dream of mine?" Evelyne asked, her voice tinged with unease. "No," Liora said, her tone softer than before. It's a reminder? Of what? The fairy rose, her movements languid yet deliberate. Of the price you agreed to pay. The heart is a peculiar thing, Evelyne. It knows when it is promised, even if its keeper wishes to forget. Evelyne felt her chest tighten, her pulse quickening. And what if I want to change my mind? Liora's smile was wistful now, tinged with something almost like regret. The clock does not move backward, princess. Every wish carries its weight. As the fairy faded into the shadows, Evelyne was left alone in the vast, empty hall, the echo of her heartbeat filling the silence. Somewhere in the distance, the castle's great clock struck 11. 11 hours until midnight. The magic had given her everything she desired. But now, with time slipping away, she began to wonder what, if anything, she truly wanted. The day of the New Year's Eve dawned cold and still. The castle wrapped in a shroud of mist that clung to its turrets and parapets. Evelyne woke with a start, her breath visible in the icy air of her chamber. Her heart beat unevenly, as though it too was aware of what was to come. The castle no longer hummed with the wonders Liora had woven. The enchanted music had stilled. The vibrant blooms had withered, and the feasts of her dreams had vanished, leaving only empty halls and long echoing silences. Evelyne's world felt hollow, a stage stripped of its actors. By midday, Evelyne could no longer ignore the oppressive weight pressing down on her chest. Her heartbeat was loud, insistent, as though it struggled against some unseen force. She sought solace in the library, where she hoped to bury herself in the comfort of words. But even the books seemed to hold their breath. It was there that she found Liora again, perched on the edge of a grand dust-laden desk, her wings folded like jagged shards of moonlight. "You've come," Evelyne said, her voice dry. "I never truly leave," Liora replied, her eyes glinting with something unreadable. "The day is heavy on you, I see." Evelyne sank into a nearby chair, resting her head against her trembling hand. "The magic is gone. Everything feels hollow. Is this what the price feels like, even before it is paid?" Liora tilted her head, her smile faint. The heart is not easily parted from its keeper. It resists, clinging to what it knows. But the pact remains. The word sent a chill through Evelyne, but she steeled herself. "I need to know," she said, lifting her gaze to meet Liora's. "The witch, this Morbeth, what will she do with my heart?" For a moment, Liora's gaze softened, as though she pitied the question. "Morbeth is not a collector of trinkets or trophies. She feeds on the essence of what makes you, you. Your heart is your vitality, your will, your very soul's anchor. Without it, you will live, but as a shadow, a hollow echo of yourself." Evelyne's breath caught, her fingers curling tightly against the armrests of the chair. Then why would you offer such a bargain? Liora's smile faded, and for the first time she looked almost weary. Because miracles are born of sacrifice, and because, Princess, you accepted. You knew on some level what was at stake. The clock in the hall chimed, its sound reverberating like a toll of fate. Evelyne flinched, her heart pounding harder as though trying to escape its prison. I have to see her, Evelyne said suddenly, rising to her feet. I need to face the witch. Liora studied her for a long moment before nodding. Then you must venture into the forest. But be warned. The witch's realm is not bound by the rules of the world you know. It will test you, twist you, and force you to confront the truths you've tried to bury. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows, its twisted trees arching overhead like the ribs of a great beast. Evelyne pressed forward, the lantern in her hand casting a feeble glow that barely pushed back the encroaching darkness. The path beneath her feet seemed to shift, winding in ways that made no sense. As she moved deeper, whispers began to surround her, soft, mocking voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Princess of hollow dreams, they hissed. What will you do when the clock strikes 12? Evelyne gritted her teeth, her pulse quickening. The forest seemed alive, shifting and breathing, and the air grew thick with a cloying scent of decay. Her lantern flickered, and for a moment she feared it would go out entirely. Finally, she emerged into a clearing bathed in an eerie crimson light. At its center stood a figure cloaked in shadow. The witch, Morbeth, was neither beautiful nor monstrous, but something far more unsettling. A being whose form refused to settle, shifting between shapes like oil upon water. You've come, Morbeth said, her voice layered with echoes. Evelyne stepped forward, her courage thin but unbroken. I have, but I will not give you my heart. Morbeth laughed, a sound like the creaking of ancient wood. O child, it is not yours to keep. The pact was sealed, the price agreed. Do you think you can unravel it now? Evelyne's fingers tightened around the lantern's handle. I'll fight. Whatever it takes, I'll fight. Morbeth's shifting form leaned closer, her gaze piercing. Fight, foolish girl. The only thing you are fighting is yourself. The witch raised a hand, and the forest around Evelyne seemed to dissolve into mist. In its place appeared visions, her dreams made flesh. Evelyne saw herself laughing, dancing, free from the weight of royalty, surrounded by people who adored her not for her title, but for who she was. And then the visions twisted, revealing a hollow-eyed version of herself, wandering aimlessly through the same golden halls she had tried to escape. Every wish carries its shadow, Morbeth intoned. The question is not whether you will pay, but how much of yourself you are willing to lose. Evelyne fell to her knees, her heart pounding harder than ever, the witch's words cutting through her like a blade. The clock, distant yet deafening, began to chime. 11 tolls. The final hour was upon her, and still the shadow of the witch loomed, waiting. The 11th chime reverberated through the clearing, each note a shudder in Evelyne's chest. The witch's shifting form loomed before her, dark as the void, and her presence was a suffocating weight. Evelyne knelt in the snow-dusted grass, clutching her lantern as though its fragile light might shield her from the truth. "You cannot stop the clock," Morbeth said, her voice curling through the air like smoke. "It moves forward, unyielding. The 12th stroke will come, and with it, your heart." Evelyne's breaths came in ragged gasps. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, its rhythm a cruel reminder of what was slipping away. The visions Morbeth had conjured still danced at the edge of her consciousness. 2 futures, both fractured. One filled with hollow freedom, the other an endless prison. From the misty edges of the clearing, a faint glow emerged. Liora stepped into view, her wings dimmed, their fractured light barely illuminating her small frame. Her face was serene, but unreadable, her eyes catching Evelyne's like a mirror reflecting something unseen. "Morbeth," Liora said, her tone a blend of calm and command. "The heart must be given willingly. That was the bargain." The witch turned, her form rippling with a barely restrained fury. "Do not meddle, fairy. The girl's heart belongs to me, and the pact binds her. She has no choice." "She always has a choice," Liora replied, stepping closer. Her voice softened as she turned to Evelyne. "The question is whether you understand the cost, Princess. Are you ready to relinquish your heart, to lose the essence of what makes you yourself, for what you have wished for?" Evelyne's hands trembled as she rose to her feet. She turned to Liora, her voice desperate. "Is there no way to undo this? No way to take it back?" Liora's expression darkened with sorrow. "Every pact is bound by the truth of its terms. To escape it is to face what you've buried deep within yourself." Morbeth laughed, a sound that twisted the air. "She will never face it. She clings to her wishes like a drowning sailor to driftwood, even as they pull her under." "Enough!" Evelyne shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of her fear and fury. She stepped forward, her lantern casting an unsteady glow against the witch's ever-shifting form. "You speak of choices, but what choice have I truly had? I wanted freedom. I wanted to live. But now I see that you've bound me to another cage, one crafted from my own desires." The witch stilled, her form sharpening into something almost human. Her eyes, black as the abyss, met Evelyne's. "Then, decide, Princess. Give me your heart and let your dreams live, or hold it and let them crumble." The words hung heavy in the clearing, and Evelyne felt her resolve waver. She glanced at Liora, who watched her with an intensity that bordered on anguish. "What will happen if I choose to keep my heart?" Evelyne asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liora's wings drooped, their light dimming further. "You will return to the life you knew. The magic will fade, and the weight of your reality will return. But you will still be whole. You will still be you." Evelyne turned back to Morbeth, who remained silent but expectant. Her heart raced, its rhythm wild and erratic, as though it feared being torn from her chest. She thought of the fleeting joys she had experienced, the taste of freedom, the spark of wonder. She thought of the emptiness that had followed, the dissonance in the beauty. She closed her eyes, her decision forming like a fragile crystal in her mind. When she opened them, she spoke with a clarity that surprised even herself. "I will not give you my heart," Morbeth hissed, her form unraveling into shadow and smoke. "You defy the Pact, foolish girl. Do you think you can escape its weight?" "I don't need to escape," Evelyne said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I need to face it. My dreams are mine, and I will carry them, not at the cost of my heart, but with it." As the words left her lips, the 12th chime rang out. The sound was deafening, shattering the stillness of the clearing. The witch screamed, her shadowy form dissipating into the crimson light. Liora stepped forward, her wings glowing brighter now, though they still seemed fragile. She reached out, her touch gentle against Evelyne's chest. "You've made your choice," she said softly. "And though it will not be easy, it is yours." The clearing dissolved into light, and Evelyne felt herself being pulled back, the world spinning around her. She awoke in her chamber, the lantern still clutched in her hand, its flame extinguished. The castle was silent, the air heavy with a strange stillness. But her heart beat steadily, a rhythm that was hers alone. The tolling bell had ceased, and for the first time, Evelyne felt the weight of her dreams, and the strength to carry them. The new year dawned with an eerie quiet. Evelyne woke to a pale sun rising over a world blanketed in frost. The castle was still, its usual hum of activity muted, as though it too had held its breath through the night. Evelyne sat on the edge of her bed, her fingers brushing against the hourglass that now sat on her bedside table. It had appeared there after the final toll of the clock. Its glass was delicate, its frame wrought from a metal that seemed to shift between silver and black, as though caught in a perpetual twilight. Inside, instead of sand, glimmering specks of light fell in a slow, mesmerizing cascade. Liora's voice echoed in her mind. "Every choice leaves its mark." Evelyne rose, dressing herself in a simple gown. She felt different, lighter, but not unburdened. Her heart beat steadily in her chest, yet it carried the weight of the choice she had made. She touched the hourglass once more before leaving her chamber, its surface cool beneath her fingers. The castle halls were unchanged. Yet Evelyne saw them anew. The grand tapestries, the glittering chandeliers, the marble floors, all were the same as before. But the enchantment was gone. The magic Liora had spun had vanished, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding reality of stone and silence. As she walked, she passed a mirror and paused. Her reflection stared back, familiar yet strange. Her eyes seemed deeper, her gaze carrying a heaviness that hadn't been there before. She leaned closer, studying herself, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a flicker of light within her pupils, a faint glimmer, like the falling specks in the hourglass. Her footsteps carried her to the gardens, where the frost had reclaimed its dominion. The vibrant blooms that had flourished under Liora's magic were gone, their stems bowed beneath the weight of ice. Evelyne knelt by the fountain, its surface frozen solid, and stared into its still depths. "Do you regret it?" The voice startled her, though it was unmistakable. Evelyne turned to find Liora standing at the edge of the clearing. Her wings were dimmer than before, their light flickering like the final embers of a dying fire. Evelyne rose, her breath visible in the frigid air. "I don't know," she admitted. "I feel as though I've gained something and lost something at the same time." Liora stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. "That is the nature of choices, Princess. They are never without cost." Evelyne studied the fairy, noting the weariness in her form. "What happens to you now? You look different." Liora's smile was faint, almost wistful. "The pact is fulfilled, and so my part is done. My magic is tied to the choices I offer, and when the choice is made, the magic fades." She glanced at the hourglass Evelyne still clutched. "But not entirely. A fragment remains, bound to you." Evelyne looked down at the hourglass, the lights within still tumbling slowly. "What is it?" "It is your heart," Liora said softly. "Not as it was, but as it has become. Every choice reshapes us. And this," she gestured to the hourglass, "is the reflection of your choice. It will remind you of what you've gained and what you've given up." Evelyne felt a pang in her chest, though it was not pain. "So, it's a piece of me?" "More than that. It's a piece of everything. Your dreams, your fears, your hope." Liora's gaze grew distant. "It will guide you if you let it. But it will not make your path easy." The fairy turned to leave, her wings trembling with the effort. Evelyne called after her, "Liora!" The fairy paused, looking back with an expression that carried centuries of unspoken truths. "Will I see you again?" Evelyne asked, her voice quiet. Liora's smile returned, faint but warm. "Perhaps. Miracles are not bound by the rules of men, and neither am I." With that, she faded into the light, her form dissolving like mist under the morning sun. Evelyne stood alone in the garden, the hourglass clutched tightly in her hands. The frost glittered around her, cold yet beautiful, and she felt a strange sense of peace. She turned toward the castle, her steps deliberate. Her life was no longer gilded with magic, but it was her own. The hours ahead stretched before her, uncertain and unshaped, yet they held a promise that she could not yet name. As she stepped through the castle doors, the hourglass pulsed faintly in her hands, its light steady and unwavering. Evelyne smiled, her heart beating steadily within her chest. And for the first time, she truly felt alive. And so, the princess carried her hourglass, not as a burden, but as a reminder, a fragile miracle born of choice, resilience, and the courage to face the shadows within.